Paul Stott is head of security and extremism at Policy Exchange, which is a really good think tank in London. Paul, thank you for joining us this afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Peter. Nice to be on.
People hear Hizb ut-Tahrir a lot of the time. It's obviously splintered into lots of different organisations at various points. Sometimes it can be hard to keep track of all the different factions and so on, although I'm sure you know it all inside out and the expert in the field that you are. But why, well, I'll get into why in a minute. But first of all, what is Hizb ut-Tahrir? Tell us about them.
Well, Hizb ut-Tahrir means Party of Liberation. They're an Islamist party formed in the Middle East back in the 1950s that looks to re-establish the caliphate. And they've been active in UK politics since the early 1990s, particularly around student politics, although the National Union of Students banned them many years ago for anti-Semitism and what have you on campus. And really, Hizb ut-Tahrir perhaps have something slightly more in common with some of the groups on the far left, that they tended to recruit much more middle-class people, quite a sort of an intellectual base, and in some ways they were sort of rather sneering and critical of the British Islamic scene, which they didn't really think was quite good enough for their taste. And that probably meant that for many years they weren't taken as seriously as they should have been by the authorities, I'm afraid.
And now they are being taken seriously by the UK authorities, but there have been lots of other governments around the world that have banned Hizb ut-Tahrir and prescribed them, have there not?
Yes, so Germany did over 20 years ago, again, because of the organisation's perceived anti-Semitism. Russia did, a whole series of countries in the Muslim-majority world. One of the things that Hizb ut-Tahrir has long advocated is a series of military coups in Muslim-majority nations so as to ensure that the government is sufficiently Islamic. So this isn't an organisation that's wedded to democratic methods, to changing the views of the majority. It looks to influence small numbers of people and to push them in a particular direction.
So why has the UK government now finally got its act together and done this? What is their reasoning now?
Well, we're in a completely new security environment following the 7th of October attacks by Hamas on Israel. I think we're probably in the worst security position, and certainly the worst position in terms of social cohesion that I can remember. But what Hizb ut-Tahrir did after the Hamas attacks, their international website, which is based in Lebanon, posted in English praise for those attacks, and was talking about the heroic feats of the Mujahideen, was portraying Hamas as holy warriors. And in the very same article, advertised a demonstration by Hizb ut-Tahrir in London. Now, it was that demonstration where I think it was the 21st of October, where some people were filmed calling for jihad in the streets. Mm. And so I think the authorities really have had to pick up the pace a little bit with regards to Hizb ut-Tahrir. And it's that praise for Hamas, that apparent support for the attacks on Israel, that was too much for the Home Secretary. And I think he's got the decision correct.
Okay, I just want to ask you one other thing related to this, Paul, but we were talking about this yesterday. We heard the counter-terror chief for the Metropolitan Police talk about the threat level and how things are, certainly in terms of terrorism, we are in a seriously bad position. But, I mean, the marches in London and in many other parts of the UK, but mainly in London, the pro-Palestinian marches, for example, which have absolutely horrendous anti-Semitism, support for Hamas terrorists, various other people talking about them. Not everybody in them, but there's a significant minority of people within those protests who are basically supporting terrorism. We've had a softly approach in terms of how those marches are policed, yet this isn't helping. Extremism is rising.
I think that seems to be the case, and there are some very big questions, some very big debates to be had about just who's been advising the Metropolitan Police. Really, since these big demonstrations started, there's been a series of controversial decisions, shall we say, in terms of prosecutions, in terms of some of the things we've seen on the marches. And there's a great danger of the police losing public confidence evidence, and this
Well,
whole
wasn't there someone, sorry, this is off the top of my head, so I can't remember, Paul, but you will. Wasn't there someone in the police control room who had some sort of sympathy with extremist groups or something? I can't quite remember that, but do you remember that story a few months ago?
There was media coverage. I'm not sure that's totally accurate, Peter, but there was media coverage which seemed to suggest that the police were bringing in community representatives into the control room during the demonstrations. And there was then a controversy over the London Muslim Communities Forum, which was one of these groups. Now,
that was it, yeah.
The Metropolitan Police have never published a full list of this group's members, which is utterly surreal, because this is an organisation that's supposedly representing the community. How are members of the community supposed to raise concerns if the community representative group's membership is for some reason secret? But one particular individual, I think the Telegraph had found a video of him chanting "from the river to the sea."
That's what it was.
And
yes.
the police took him off the committee. It's not entirely clear what is happening with that committee. It's still not clear who its other members are. And I'm afraid this is another of those situations where the police aren't really giving the public what we need. Yeah. We need a much clearer picture of who's advising them, who they're working with, what's going on in these control rooms. Without it, we can't have confidence in them.
Completely correct, Paul. Thank you. And sorry for misremembering that. It was a vague memory, and then you clarified it, of course, because you are the expert. Dr. Paul Stott there, Head of Security and Extremism at Pulse 6G.